In my own story, in my past book, at least in time of recording my last book, New Dawn Silver Soul, I have moment very early on when I show Rebel Camp, but basically I, without realizing that they have same term in Star Wars, I'm gonna have to change that. I call them Rebel Alliance. I did called other guys, the other side. I hesitate to say bad guys because I like when villains have point of view too. They fight against Imperial Coalition, and I think I call them maybe Rebel Confederates or something like that. Confederates is not a great idea either, because story is partially inspired by American history, and we don't want to use Confederates for anything. Doesn't matter. We'll find out later. Point being, early on in chapter 1 or 2, phone is talking, we find out that rebels are not one army. They're, yes, they use term like rebel army, or they just say colloquially the rebels. But in just this, rebel is made, rebel army in this story is made of very, very vague federation, even though they have one leader named Francis, who's kind of a wild character, which I wrote only briefly. I'm gonna go really deep into in both later mini podcasts and second draft, but they have one leader, they have one thought, they have one image of victory, but they are not the one. They are literally dozens of groups of different size, different level of disciplines, and different level of preparedness. We have provinces who are effectively as big as states were in real life in America, except numbers are much higher. In the story, magic and technology is much more advanced, as you would expect for Renaissance era, so I thought it would be appropriate to raise numbers higher too. We're talking millions and hundreds of thousands in each provinces. We also talking small city states, independent city states who are smaller than provinces and states, but they're independent and they join the rebellion. We're talking straight up villages, independent villages of few hundreds or less who decided were either forced or voluntarily forced by enemy or just saw the meaning of uprising and joined it, and they all want to govern themselves. So it's not like Francis, the rebel leader, is leading one army. He's leading dozens of guys who are up to hundred thousands and millions. He's leading much many more groups who are cities, is leading villages, and even individuals who they don't even know where they want to go. And story focuses on one of those provinces, smaller one called Emgard. They're basically inspired by Virginia, from what I understand from American history. Not my country, but I just love American history. It's irony when you think about it. Americans and Canadians are all about castles and Napoleon and big princesses and kings. Meantime, I from Slovakia, in city I grew up in and city I am right now, we have two giant castles within city. I can get in the car and be in castle in less than maybe 40 minutes, depending on traffic. Point being, but yet I'm interested in American history, in frontier, in colonization of new world, in civil wars, in revolution against empires, and in vague alliance. Now, we have situation Emgar, I based on Virginia. I wanted to be the smallest one who also wants to fight. And since Emgar is so small, they have money, but they don't have enough people, and those people are not well trained. So Baron, leader of the Emgar province, I didn't even bother to name him in first draft, which I don't recommend, but that's just how I write. I try to get with first draft as fast as possible, done with it, so I can focused on collecting all the ideas and keeping them together. Point being, Baron, he has his own army, his own knights, and his own people, his own common folk. Then he has Order of Barnabas, which is knightly order who was sent to assist him. And he bought, or rather bought help, he hired mercenary army, so-called, even as in real life, maybe you know it from Final Fantasy XIV, so-called free company, a whole mercenary company called Skybreak, which main character Lars and his wife are, and many other characters are part of. And now we have a situation where we have army made of multiple smaller groups. One of those groups where we focus on is also made of their leader, nobility, their own commoners, mercenaries from different continents, and knightly orders. So we have at least 4 or 5 factions who don't necessarily like each other at all, yet they must learn how to work with each other just to make this one group function, so they can function as a cog in the machine of whole rebel army. And this is where writing tip comes from. Think of, if you ever saw Matryoshka, which is toy from Russia, it's like this doll, you open it, and then you open it, and then inside it is smaller doll, you open that one, inside of it is smaller doll. You can use this for your story. You can make group like rebel army, and then explain that this group is made of much smaller groups, and each group is made of much smaller groups. Like I said before, and early in the story, one of the noblemen gets into altercation with Mia. Mia is very popular among rebels and even commoners. The Lord himself might not be popular, but he's still nobleman. So if something happens, if this escalates into violence, that means that noblemen won't fight in Baron's rebellion, which means that knights are useless. And knights promise to fight. Knights might not love the mercenaries, but mercenaries and knights are the best soldiers in Emgard army. They're better than noblemen. So now we have situation where mercenaries argues with noblemen. Commoners live under nobles, but they like mercenaries, and knights promise to serve nobles. They also promise to protect commoners, and they need mercenaries because they see that mercenaries are only good enough to match them, and possibly they are even better. In fact, if that's not enough, Baron decides that mercenary leader Lang will lead Lars's boss. Mercenary leader Lang will lead all of his troops in field, even though Baron makes still political decisions. Lang leads all these whole big circles, his own mercenaries, commoners and noblemen and knights. And this is just one province, one state. So if those guys fell apart, Emgard explodes. And imagine it. And every other state or every other province in the rebel army might have just as big trouble or worse to keep it together. So now we have, it's cool that they're rebels, it's cool that they're awesome, and they fight for right thing, but they're effectively one giant. We're talking basically rebel army in this story is house of cards made of million cards, and if you pull single one, it all comes crashing down. And that is good thing for us as a writers. It's not as good for characters in the story who had to deal with it, but for us as writers, it means that we can add insane amount of character development and conflict. And remember, conflict means that something is happening, and character development means that audience doesn't feel like their time was wasted. So with this, and putting this in your own story, you can make cops fighting, or law enforcement fighting criminals. But law enforcement is made of FBI, private detectives, witnesses, and undercover cops who might not all get along. You might put story reverse. You might make story out of criminal organization, but there could be all boss. It could be his son who doesn't agree with him. He could be gang who joined their forces temporarily. It could be some people who doesn't want to be gangsters anymore and want to be legalized. Think about it. Look at the groups in your story and make sure that while not that necessarily they're mean to each other or they argue, but make sure they all have something to say, make sure that all have something to think about and they have own goals and own opinions. That way you make both characters and group, and that way whole story feel more alive and more exciting for your audience. If you find this tip in any way useful or entertaining, I would love if you could like or subscribe or even share. It definitely helps me grow this channel. In the meantime, I hope I will hear you next time. Thank you for listening. Stay awesome.